I had prepped a presentation. Well, I say it was actually my team who were here, and they spent lots of time on it, and we did lots of things with it. And what I've realised now is it's not really what you want to hear. What I've heard here is a lot of questions. There's a lot of things we need to talk about. So what I'm going to do is actually skip through this really quickly, just focus on the key points, and my colleague John is going to do a few slides on international, he's over here. And then we're going to make the Q&A much longer than it was planned, so that we can really have the sort of frank debate I think we need. I'm also going to pull out a few of the points which I've heard today, make a little provocation, and then we'll take it from there. So I'll skip through these. I'll just pause on a few key points. So, and actually what I'll also do, so you can see it properly, is I'll make sure that this is available to you by email. So I plan to talk about the Arts Council, what we do. Our mission is about the arts. We invest a lot of money. We support lots of activities, and our role isn't just as a funder. We work through partnership, advocacy, development, as well as investment. We have 5 goals. Now, I will pause here a bit. So these 5 goals are what directs all of our funding, and this is what we have to report back to government, to the public. This is what we base all of our funding thinking around. And you can sort of typify them more easily as being about access. Goal 1 is about excellence, goal 2 is about access, goal 3 is about resilience, goal 4 is about diversity and workforce, and goal 5 is about children and people. Now, Carnival has always had a real rootedness within goal 2 about access. But what the Arts Council wants to do much more clearly is actually think about Carnival around goal 1, and that's around excellence, around the artists, and that's what I've heard really clearly today. And I'm really encouraged that I think we're saying the same thing. We work across 5 areas. We have regional officers in each of those areas, broadly. And I'll pause a bit on this. So since we moved to an area approach, we have slightly fewer staff, but actually luckily combined arts, because that's seen as a real priority within the Arts Council, because it is very much about access and about excellence. We have a really fantastic combined arts team who are spread over the whole country, and each area has at least one relationship manager who has a particular role to support Carnival artists. Some of them are here in the room, and I'll ask them to stand up and just show their faces. You know some of them. There were far more here earlier, but they've had to go home, sorry. Say hi. And as well as those people actually having a particular role, that they've also been working in a working group within the Arts Council to really sort of think about, talking with you guys too, thinking about how we can genuinely support the sector for its long-term growth. I will pause on this one as well, because this is the kind of bad news in a way. So what I'm saying here is that our own investment isn't fixed. I mean, even though we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know what will happen after the next election, the sorts of conversations we're having with government tell us that we could be facing cuts of up to 20%. Now, that's a pretty grim picture. I mean, we always expect change. We will always model certain size cuts, but there's something, I think we are faced with more austerity. And what that means is that we're at a really key moment right now, where the sector and the sectors really need to come together to make the case, particularly between now and the May election, to really make the case for the arts. And that's something you can all help with, because actually coming from you, it has much more credence than it does coming from us. And there's a kind of interesting thing about that, whereby there's a perception that actually we can talk to government about the arts. And yes, we can to an extent. But of course we'll say it's great. And of course we'll say that it solves all sorts of problems. But actually coming from you, who are actually doing it, has a lot more credence. You also know more than anybody that there are real challenges within local authorities. Their funding's being cut. They've always been really strong supporters of Carnival, because they can see the sort of difference which it makes to the sense of place. So there are challenges, but I think there's also hope and scope for growth. You'll know that we have two kinds of funding: national portfolio funding, grants for the arts, and also some more strategic funding programmes. So thinking particularly about national portfolio companies, which are the kind of 3-year funded the infrastructure, if you like. So between 2012 and 15, we funded 16 organisations. Going forward, between 2015 and 18, they're organisations who are particularly linked with Carnival, who will be funded going forward. Now, Grants for the Arts, I think, is a really key programme for supporting Carnival, and I know you'll have all had experience. I can tell some's been good, some has been not so good. But what we've seen is it has increased, it has gone up. So in 12-13, we invested 2.5 million. And bearing in mind that was 12-13 when the Olympics were on. And in 13-14, that's increased to 3.6 million. So Grants for the Arts, they're the rules, you'll know them very well. Now this is something which our Carnival Task Group have worked really hard on. So yes, you might ask me, what does an internal task group do? Is it just a sort of talking shop? Actually, in this case, it isn't. One of the problems we identified was that there were often people who applied to us for their carnival in some ways for the wrong things, not the things we could fund easily. There were also, across the staff of the Arts Council, there was perhaps less knowledge than there should be about what was fundable, what Carnival application might look like. So we've created a really comprehensive advice sheet which lets applicants really understand what it is we can fund, and it also makes sure that the people assessing the grants really understand what it is they're looking for. Now that's very new. We're also working with a number of our MPOs to look at individual surgeries, and again that's a thing which I think is particularly key for this sector and also others. Because although it isn't an art to write an application form, and it shouldn't be because it is open access, you know, there is a particular skill to be able to really identify what it is you're doing and the way that that fits to our goals. So I mentioned earlier about Goal 1, and we want to have a particular focus on our investment around high quality artistic practice within Carnival. And that's absolutely what I've heard today. So I think, as I say, we're saying exactly the same thing. We really want to look at the funding which we provide to be about the creation and development of Carnival arts rather than the whole production. And we're keen for Carnival artists and organisations to really continue to share excellent practice with the wider sector. And it was great to hear the group beforehand talking about what it is they've learned. And I think somebody suggested, what about a symposium? Yes, we would love to be part of that. And we also have, I suppose in some way, a really enhanced commitment to diversity, and particularly around creativity within diversity, and again linking that to our Goal 1, which is about excellence. And a colleague of mine, Deborah, is in the room, who's one of our diversity teams. So the creative case is a new approach which is about making sure that we invest in the best art and the best artists. And now I'm aware that I said I would just kind of trip through these slides, and I'm actually spending quite a bit of time on them, so I'm going to speed up. So equality and diversity, this is more around the kind of compliance side about what we do rather than the pure creative case, which is about art. So those of you who applied to the MPOs will know that you were rated on the creative case contribution you make. That was a kind of light touch process. We're going to do that again, so it's a bit more robust. Again, focused on Goal 1. And if an organisation is rated as weak, they will have additional monitoring as part of their funding agreement. Now, what I want to make clear is that applies to all MPOs across the whole portfolio. This isn't about the MPOs we would say were diverse. This is the whole the whole landscape. And we will be publishing annual data on that, so there's something which will be very public and very transparent. Now this is something else which I want to spend a bit more time on. What I've heard quite a lot today is about the sector, and when you're talking about the sector, you mean Carnival. Now we have and that's right, but there's a whole set of other sectors which are aligned, and I can sense some of you see a part of that, some of you don't. But the way that I see it, and I think the way the Arts Council sees it, is that there's a kind of Venn diagram, and there are very separate and special aspects to Carnival, to outdoor art, to festival, to street art. But actually within the middle of that Venn diagram, there's a set of attributes which are quite similar. There's a set of attributes I think we as funders should look at together. And that is about excellence. That's about having the right range of artists being able to make work. It's about this huge issue of whether or not we should make people pay for outdoor art. I mean, that's a massive issue. That's across Carnival, that's across festivals. And we know that in those places and in those festivals where they've taken a very thoughtful approach, where they've thought about starting with a low price range, where they've made sure that people aren't excluded, where they've done special offers for families, where they work closely with their commercial vendors to make sure that that works. That's actually worked, and that has brought an income, but it's also helped people get a different relationship with their audience, and that's quite key. The other aspect about festivals, outdoor arts and Carnival, we take part, the sector takes part in a survey which is done every quarter by the government, which is called Taking Part, and that gives us a set of data over time. And although there were some issues with it, the fact that it's been going on now for a long time gives us real sort of trend data. And what that data shows is that increasingly the way that people get their art, the way that people make art, the way that people find art is outdoors, in festivals, on the street, in carnivals, in street arts. So that starts to become an even more important aspect for us because if that's where the public are going, if that's where the public are getting their arts, it's our duty to make sure that we support it as best we can and make it as best we can. So in terms of outdoor art, we're really keen to think about some real world-class commissions, to think bigger. I mean, lots of the speakers this morning and this afternoon have talked about 2012, and that was a huge opportunity, a huge ambition, a huge flowering. We don't want that to just die. We want to find a way that actually we can support some real ambition and some real talent. This is obviously, it's a very international sector. We want to be able to support exchanges. We want to be able to build new audiences and also develop new platforms. That's about talent development. So, particular opportunities. There's a £45 million touring fund. There's been very limited success or access to that from Carnival. And actually what we've heard today about kind of sharing best practice, about making sure different carnivals and different carnival events have a real chance to work with artists they want to, that's a very key programme. You should be in that. Exceptional awards. Now this is a programme which is kind of a 2012 legacy in a way. It's being able to fund with large sums of money, which are often around sort of £200,000, to fund a particular opportunity, and that's often if there's an anniversary, if there's a chance to work with an amazing world-class artist which suddenly comes up. It's in some ways it's quite responsive, but it's about ambition. And there's a small number made each year, and again there certainly hasn't been a carnival one. I think there's been one outdoor arts one in there, and given that in 2015, 2016 there were some really key anniversaries coming up within Carnival, I think you're really well placed to think about something quite ambitious. And then there is a diversity fund which Deborah may be able to speak about afterwards when we have a Q&A. That'll be £6 million over the 2015 to 18 and £6 million in the Outdoor Arts Fund. So that's the end of my slides, and in a second John's going to come up and just finish off. And actually, I'll let John do it now, and then I'm just going to make a few points about some of the points which you've heard today.
Thank you. International funding. If any art form is international, it's carnival. It's been in the room all day. International, it's constantly been talked about. I don't think you could go to a conference involving any other art form in this country which would have talked about international connections as much as has been going on here today. As it happens, luckily, we have some strategic funds, but before I talk about them, I just wanted to underline that Arts Council's approach to international working has changed. There's always been a bit of an issue around where lottery funding can go and who benefits from lottery funding, and it's always had to be quite internally focused into England. But there is a change in approach from Arts Council, and so we are now seeing and recognising the benefit of international working within our funding streams, regardless of this international one. We're recognising it all over. We're recognising that if you go somewhere else to work with some other people outside of this country and bring that learning back here, there is a benefit then in England to the English audiences and to the people that you work with in England. And that deferred benefit is absolutely eligible for within all of our funding streams, broadly speaking, not just this international fund. So it's eligible for grants for the arts, is what I'm saying. Okay, so this is what we're trying to do. But I think one of the key things about the word in there that I think is key is mobility. It's about mobility, it's about cultural exchange. And that's a cultural exchange that goes both ways. And it's something I'll come back to in a couple of minutes. So, there will be, we think, probably 4 strands. I say we think because we haven't launched all of them yet. In fact, I haven't launched any of them yet, except for the International Development Fund, which has been running for a while. And I'm going to concentrate on those top 2 because they are the only ones that we've got full details on, but we need to keep an eye on what comes out over the next few months about international touring and about working with international artists, as Alison has just referred to, around perhaps exceptional awards, around doing large projects with companies from overseas. Artist International Development Fund then. Okay, so this is relatively small amounts of money, although it's very, very useful money. We've heard a little bit about it earlier on. It's about individuals and small companies now going and spending some time somewhere else, out of this country, learning from other people, sharing practice with other people, possibly developing a piece of work, possibly not, possibly just being with other people. You need a host. You need somebody who's going to host you, and otherwise you don't need a great deal, and you apply for up to £5,000 from us to go and do it. We have had success within the carnival sector, within this fund, despite it having some very, being massively oversubscribed, and that's something that I'm sure it continues to be oversubscribed, but we are actually upping the amount of money available in this fund. But there have been 3 carnival projects funded through this fund in the last couple of rounds, which might not sound very much, but sadly that represents about 25% of the combined arts projects that have been funded. We've had 2 projects in Brazil, one of which we heard about earlier, and we also had a project that went to India, which does take us on to the other strand of international funding, which we are launching in January, Reimagine India. What you need to know is that in January it's launching, and we are very much looking at developmental projects initially. So actually what you can be applying for in January is to go and try and develop something with some people in India that you've got a relationship with, that you want to build a relationship with. This could be experimental. In January, that round will open. The following January, there will be another round when projects being taken to fruition will be what will be funded. Some projects taken to fruition could be funded this time around, but there is that development opportunity in there. This, as with the Artist International Development Fund, is a fund in partnership with the British Council. There is more information on the website, and there are staff in all the Arts Council offices who you can talk to further about it. And I'll just mention one more thing, which I'm really not going to talk about a great deal, which is Creative Europe. But I think, again, Creative Europe is a great opportunity for Carnival. Collaboration projects is the best and the most likely source, and also it's the largest amount of money available within the Creative Europe funding. And Europe will fund up to 60% of a project between, if it's a small project, it's up to 200,000 euros between 3 organisations. If it's a large project, it's up to 5 million euros over a 4-year period. There you need 6 partners for that. And when it says partners, it means countries and partners, in fact. So that's going to be 3 different countries or 6 different countries. Arts Council funding can be used as match, so you can get 60% of the money out of Europe, and you can use Arts Council funding as match for a lot of the rest. Really, what I'm trying to do here is flagging up some opportunities and underlining that the carnival sector is absolutely ideally placed to capitalise on some of these in terms of the work that you're doing, in terms of the international nature of that work. There is help available in Arts Council offices around all of these strands. We also have Creative Europe. We've got particular expertise which is part funded by the British Council. So what you would do is initially talk to your local person in an Arts Council office. They might help you a certain way down the road with Creative Europe, but we can then pass you on to somebody who knows exactly how to apply to Creative Europe and the things that you need to do, because inevitably what they want to hear is slightly different from what Arts Council wants to, Arts Council wants to hear, as is the way with all funding. I will stop there and come back to Alison.
So before we start on the Q&A, I just wanted to pick up on a few of the points that I've heard today, really, and I think some of it will come up in the questions. So, so I'll start with a bit on publications. So the title of this conference is One Sector, One Voice. What I've heard today and what I've seen in the past year or so while working with the carnival sector is that it's complex, that it's multifarious, that it changes, that it can change its shape, and that it has a great artistic and creative heart. So I wonder whether you are one sector with one voice, or whether you're more likely a set of networks, a set of organisations, and that you are lots of voices singing one song. I think that's a question you might want to ask yourselves, and that might be something that, when you're thinking about what a national board might look like, if indeed that happens, how do you get into that, the kind of complex networks around the country, while still being able to speak where it's important with one voice? Because it is true that there's a Theatrical Management Association, there's a Visual Arts Network, there are kind of art form networks which do have a voice. So thinking about how to make those two things work together is quite key. The other thing which I've heard, which I've mentioned now 2 or 3 times, is that there's such a strong kind of artist-led approach to the sector, and I think you should work really hard to keep that. So yes, you might be social changers and placemakers and educators and economic agents, but that all happens because you're an artist, so don't lose that. But then equally, I've also heard a bit of fear about commercialisation, and I think the beer example from Denmark is just fantastic. Those people will buy beer anyway. Why don't they buy your beer? I don't think that takes away from the heart and soul of the art. And what else was I saying? Oh yeah, finally, I've also heard quite a lot about the power of data and economic impact. I'd be really careful about sort of how much weight you place on that, and actually how much weight it actually has. There are economic surveys coming out of everyone's ears, and they all say the same thing. They say things are amazing. Most towns and cities that run festivals or carnivals will do their own. Something came out from Liverpool, I think, just last month, where their Orthodox Giants show made, what did they say, £46 million into the local economy, really? And because there's so much of that around, there's so much data, there are so many figures, there's kind of a lack of credence, certainly within government, about that. And while yes, we really need to make sure we know what the impact is, that's not why government funds the arts. Government funds the arts because of all the things we know about. It's about well-being, it's about creativity, it's about being happy, it's about making a worthwhile place to live. So yes, use data, but don't put the weight in the wrong places. And I think that's all I want to say. So I'm happy to take questions now. I presume that it will be chaired, hopefully. Not going here.
Loved the messages, loved the information, loved the flags flown. I think you've been very excitable. This thing sounded great for you. Not sure of the provocation. You left alone. One sector, one voice. United could add up to united you shout. Lots of voices, one song could add to dividing you sing.
Hi, I'm Donna from Cam. I just wanted to pick up on the network issue that you talked about. There are a number of emerging networks that are really strong and doing their own thing really effectively, and I think that's important to carry on, and we can't just wait for a national body to take over and become one voice. Although we can feed into that when it happens. I think we need to get on with what we're already doing. You've already seen the discussion about piloting charging in the events. We've all got to be a bit more entrepreneurial about getting different, diversifying our income streams, which we're doing through voluntary contributions, selling wristbands at carnivals, things like that. But also about I just want to echo the fact that the surgeries have been effective. We've only done one, and it was last year. Held in Nottingham. We had 10 troupes and carnival artists represented. Out of that, 8 were successful in getting grants for the arts, and we had them all talking to the Arts Council officers. Arts Council supported us, and so did UKCCA. So take up Houghton's offer of getting someone to look over the bids, because that did total £64,000 worth of investment in our carnival parades, which was on top of what we already get. So even though it's not directly coming to carnivals, I mean, there's different ways of us enhancing what we do through the networking and through MCAN being kind of a successful partnership.
Alison, you said that you don't want to fund carnival production, but you want to fund the art. And I don't understand how you can divide the two. It feels sometimes to me that that's a little bit unfair, because I do work in the theatre and I work in carnival, and I feel that the theatre is totally supported with its production. And carnival really struggles to be able to get a really good production, which is why I tried so hard to show these different venues that we work in that are really resourced. And carnival the art can't actually grow without it being supported by the production. And it is because the production is so weak that we remain struggling. So I don't know what can be done to ensure that that side of it is supported, so that we can create the high quality, because I think the two go hand in hand.
No, I think that was a case of me using slightly the wrong word there. So yes, of course, the production is supported, as is a certain amount of admin. So if you need somebody to actually run the carnival while the artists are making the work, that's also part of it. It's more the and this is the same actually within theatre, within street art. We focus on the art and what the art needs in order to happen. So there's a whole host of other aspects which are harder for us to fund. So, the cost of road closures, the cost of police, that's something which is more often borne by a local authority, by business improvement districts, that kind of thing. So we're just what I was trying to do there was to in some ways do something which may seem a bit semantic, kind of separating out the carnival art and everything around it, including its artists, from the whole production of the carnival itself. So I hope that's a bit clearer.
It's clear, but it's not what I wanted to hear.
That's great.
We need you to support the carnival as a whole, because the people who run carnival, like Juliet, and now like the UKCCA, where are we getting the money to pay for this?
We're not the only funder. We're the Arts Council. We fund the arts. We fund the work which makes the environment in order to make the work happen. Local authorities are key funders. We're seeing a lot more funding coming from business improvement districts. We're starting to even see some early signs that the LEPs, the local economic partnerships, are starting to think about funding. Big Lottery is very much a source because of the work you do around building communities. And also HLF, Heritage Lottery Fund, is one which I think is really quite underexplored, and I'd be really interested to know whether people have actually got funding through that, because I know that they're interested in this. And actually you're both a heritage form and a modern cultural form. You've got both of those sides, and so there's a much bigger funding pot which is out there, I think, than just Arts Council. I think actually one of the things which our officers and our staff can do is actually help you think about those broader funding options too, rather than just our own funding.
Hello, you mentioned earlier that we should talk to the government about how our work affects our public and the people that we're dealing with. If we don't talk to the government through you, how do we talk to the government?
You talk to the public, and the government listens to the public. I mean, it's there is on the Arts Council's website. There's a toolkit called Making the Case, and already today I've seen a number of films and videos which I think can actually form part of some of the advocacy work you might do on your sector's behalf, to make the case to the public, to the audiences you serve, to your local councillors, your local MP, your local school, your local head teacher. It's those kinds of bodies which then will speak with a voice to the government. So it isn't all direct, and yes, we can speak with them directly, but we can only tell them what it is you're saying, if you see what I mean. So it's quite a complex messaging arrangement, and that's why I would really urge you to go onto the website, look at the toolkit, because that puts those messages in a sort of cohesive context.
I'd just like to say thank you to the Arts Council for such a good presentation. But I'm a carnival person, I think it was too much text, but it doesn't matter. The thing I'm going to say is to do two things, networking and international working. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Pax Nindi from Global Carnival Center. Global Carnival Center was put mainly because of international work outside UK. And we've got things like, we've got ambassadors, people like Anne and so on, we've got like global ambassadors from all over the world. And I also want to speak up on the point that Donna made about networking. There's so many networks around the country, and also this challenge of sort of saying how you deal with these workshop networks, and also understanding really what carnival is. You know, unlike rock and roll, it's got different departments, you've got calypso, you've got steel pan, and so on. So if you're doing an event like this, usually people just think, let's invite the carnival people, but they think of costumes, and they forget the steel pan, forget the samba, and so on. So that's how much a challenge it is. So I got one question to the Arts Council about the international funding, because it's quite a very good funding for carnival. The challenge with carnival is when it comes to sort of say we need a partnership funding, most of the groups don't have that. So you end up with just like reading the literature, people, visual arts people going out. But with the international funding, I don't know, it's a question with that for outdoor work, which you know we don't charge most of this work, which is just go to Julian's point about that they're trying to charge it in parts where people don't want to pay for outdoor work. So is it possible to have a separate criteria for outdoor work compared to the, you know, Shakespeare and all that kind of stuff?
No. That's a short answer. I mean, I'll ask John to come into to come in on some of the kind of technical aspects of the fund. I mean, he mentioned earlier, particularly with European funding, it's actually possible to match European funding with our funding. So therefore, you actually have you can actually have 100% funding from those two sources. Do you want to talk a bit about match? In the fund? I don't agree. So one of the things, one of the reasons there was a Catalyst programme for Carnival, one of the reasons there's a Catalyst programme for an outdoor arts sector group, which Emojis Exit Arts and others are part of. One of the reasons there's one which involves ISAN is this issue, which is about when you've got free work, when it's outdoors, when it's public, how do you bring in funding and income? And that's a challenge going forward. However, there is funding. Organisations are funded. Carnival is funded, and so there is match available, and it would not be the right thing to have a separate criteria. But one of the things which I think it would drive Carnival sector towards, and actually lots of other sectors, is about collaboration. How can you work with partners? How can you work with some of the possibly more regularly funded institutions in order to work together to make a genuine partnership bid which can access that funding? Do you want to add anything about match to international?
No, I think you've covered that. Yeah.
Good.
Oui. Amici Rose from France, I apologize. I asked my friend Charles Beauchamp to translate. Prefer to speak in French. Oui. Donc je suis très agréablement surprise de voir la politique financière menée par l'organisation par rapport au financement du carnaval et de l'art.
I'm really delighted to hear the politics behind the funding issue delivered by the arts council. In regards directly to carnival arts.
Parce qu'en France, la politique culturelle nationale par rapport au mot carnaval n'existe pratiquement pas. Il y a un snobisme français, on va financer les arts de la rue, les arts vivants, mais carnaval c'est trop populaire, c'est pour le snobisme français, ça n'existe pas assez malheureusement.
There's a clear distinction in France. The arts are supported, but carnival comes right at the bottom. Street theatre is acceptable as an art form, as all the more traditional art forms, but as it's a popular art form, carnival is derided and neglected.
Et aussi, j'ai beaucoup apprécié que dans vos critères, vous ayez mis en premier la qualité artistique. Parce qu'effectivement, si par exemple la ville de Nice met de l'argent dans le carnaval, c'est d'abord le rapport touristique et économique. La qualité artistique, elle n'est pas le critère premier.
There's a really fundamental aspect that she applauds, and that is that you put a number one criteria that was the artistic excellence. Because in Nice, the problem is that is not the first objective criteria, it is what revenue it brings in from tourism and other industries.
Alors, toutes mes félicitations et bonne continuation et vive Carnival Arts, United Kingdom.
Many congratulations, and may you further the cause of Carnival as you are doing.
Thank you.
If I can briefly respond to that in English, I'm afraid I have no French at all. So the issue about Carnival being seen as somehow sort of second rate, somehow not proper, is one which has been there in the past. I think it was wrong then. And I think this is about part of the focus on the work that you're doing, on the things you're saying, and also these things we're saying, which is, it's about excellence, it's about artists. That's the thing which is absolutely, and also rightly, making it rise right up the agenda. And I have this real hatred in the perception which does somehow is there still, where there's a sense that if people go to Carnival and they get a great experience, and it's the same for the festival sector, then somehow that will lead them to the proper art. Actually, this is the proper art. It doesn't have to lead you to a theatre. This is a thing in itself, and that's right. But the thing which I would say is actually whichever sort of mechanism your funding comes from, the fact you got €5 million for the carnival, that's quite impressive. I mean, that's not how we spend the money.
About 5 years ago, the Carnival Arts Organization were asked to look at taking their work to new audiences. And Leicester Caribbean Carnival wanted to take carnival arts into the theatre because we think that just doing it on the road alone, there were lots of misunderstandings about carnival. The application was sent in and turned down, and the excuse for not, for not accepting it for funding was because we're not a theatre organization, and if we wanted to have the funding, we would have to let the Curve Theatre lead on the application, and we just sort of like follow behind. My feeling is that it's wrong, that we have to give our idea and our work to the theatre in order for us to be able to produce what we want to produce, because we are the ones who have the knowledge and the skills with regards to what we want to produce. They can be co-producers, but not taking the whole credit for the production. And I'm wondering if any thought has been paid in terms of addressing that problem, because carnival arts is actually we did it at the Special Olympics, it went again in the Olympics. There is no reason why we can't go to the Olympics and be accepted, and we can't go into the theatre on our own to produce something. I think there's something wrong here.
I don't want to comment on that particular application because I don't know what's behind it. What I would say is that I actually think that it's right for partnerships to happen. I think it would be great to see more partnerships between carnival and theatre. I think that if in the case of that partnership it didn't feel equal, well then clearly that wasn't the right thing for that time. And I guess part of the thinking and the work going forward is about making sure that those partnerships are equal, and that's something we would look for. You know, if something came in from a carnival organisation that didn't look as though the partnership was authentic, and actually equally for the theatre, we would ask questions about what work might then result from it. But I think we're in a different place now to the place we were 5 years ago. Not least because theatre's changing, theatre's realising that it has to kind of go beyond the walls. So I can see that being something which happens more and more often, but those partnerships need to be really authentic.
This isn't really a question. I'm just want to say that I think that I'm quite new to all of this sort of like environment of like carnival conferencing. You might be able to hear that from my shaky voice. Right. I think it's a really good opportunity at the moment. I think I definitely need to talk to you because I want to make work to go into carnivals. I want to make work to go into theatres. I've got an associate here who choreographs. He's from this local area. I'm from the North East. But yeah, and Clary, love to hear about like theatre and making. Like, well, yeah. We're in show business. We are in show business. No matter which way you put a spin on it, carnival is show business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Arts Council. We appreciate everything you do for us. But it really does feel that there's an imbalance. You said that the people, the public, get their art from the outdoor arts. So then why are there organizations that are funded, one organization, more than our whole carnival sector? That to me feels completely unfair. And in terms of diversity, I grapple with trying to understand. I remember when I first saw that we were expecting I need to have an Indian and a Chinese and I need to have a... What does that mean? So, does it mean, and I did ask you this once before, I asked this here, because I need to understand, how are we measuring the success of diversity action plans? Is it by the number of people? So therefore, if a certain organization is receipt of so much money, how many black designers will be in the next 3 years benefiting from that money? How many black dancers or singers will, I don't understand how diversity works in terms of the action plan. And I expected to count how many different people of different cultures are benefiting on a daily basis. In that case, somebody else said to me, you know what it means? It means that the only black people benefiting from that diversity are the cleaners. And I just need you to hear that that is what somebody said to me, that money means that organization and that where diversity and BME and all of that sits would not actually be seen in the art. And you know, we feel disadvantaged because the facilities are so fantastic, but we will not access it. So how do I encourage Sadisha to come out of college, to go, and I feel this all the time, how do I encourage her to go to do a degree, to go where? To struggle for the rest of her life as a black girl? No, and I know what she's going to, because she was the only black girl in her course, and I was the only black girl on mine. In the 80s, it isn't changing. So there is a very big issue here about how BME are fairly treated, but if you're talking diversity, then what does it mean? I don't understand. How is that diversity action plan for huge millions of pounds going to show or going to benefit anybody in this room, considering that our people will not be accessing that art because they can't afford it?
I will answer the first part of your question, which was about the funding imbalance. I'm then going to ask Deborah, my colleague, to answer the question about diversity, if that's okay, Deborah? So can Deborah have a mic? So the first question about imbalance. So first of all, the issue about the trend in outdoor art, and it is specifically outdoor art festivals and carnival. That's the data, what it tells us. Now, I'm sure you've all heard lots and lots of talk recently about the imbalance between London and the regions. So the arts funding issue is complex, it's long term, it takes a long time to change. But all I can say is we are committed to change. We are committed to being to make sure that our funding reflects contemporary society much more effectively, which means that if that society is actually getting its art, as I said, outdoors, in festivals and carnivals, what does that mean for the funding we use? It may not always mean changing the organisations we fund completely, because one of the interesting things about, say, theatre is the way in which it's much, much more accessing a much more diverse range of artists, a much more diverse range of art forms. It's taking its work outside, it's doing pop-up work. So there's a kind of cultural change happening anyway, which will help shift funding too. But I'm not going to ask Deborah to answer the diversity question.
What does diversity mean? Okay, so first of all, diversity isn't a substitute for black. And I think that's something we need to get away from. When we talk about diversity in the Arts Council, when we talk about the creative case diversity, we're talking about the complexity of that. So we're talking about race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, marital status in relation to the Equality Act. So when you are being asked to write a diversity action plan, the same as any of the big organisations that you inferred, that is about across what are the protected characteristics. So that's not just going, because I'm a black organisation, I do diversity. What is the diversity within that? So are you working with disability groups? Are you working with groups with a lesbian, gay and transgender communities? What sort of work are you doing above and outside of where you would ordinarily work? So that is what we mean by diversity. So when we talk about the creative case diversity in Goal 1, we're talking about having all of that represented, which is about telling different stories, which is about encouraging and working with more people to be able to access funds from us, from other people, but also equality action plans are complex items because they are related to the business plans of each and every organisation, which means that we will have 670 different business plans and equality action plans. So what we're trying to, because each one is related to the business model that each organisation, each funded organisation works with. So the idea is that, well, not the idea, what we are actually doing in terms of monitoring, which is for the first time we are doing this, from next April, when you sign your funding agreements in the beginning of next year, you will have a re-rating, and we are working now on what that means. So what are the identifiers and the characteristics of a weak, of an organisation who contributes weak or strong, and where do they anticipate them going in over the next year? Because we're doing it on an annual basis. So at the beginning of each year you'll get a rating, at the end of each year you get another rating. And as one of the slides said, there'll be flags in the year. If you are a weak organisation, it will be discussed over the year. So weak could mean anything from all you have are three black people in your audience, once a year. You do one black show, and that's it. It's a black show, and that's it. There's no notion of anything beyond that. You hire some show that has been touted around for years and years. You put it on your stage. 3 black people come up. We've done diversity. That will be contributing weekly to the creative case. So in relation to Carnival, it's thinking about when your high season is there, and Carnival Arts, where do people go outside of that season? Who do you work with? Who do you connect people with? You in particular are in a position to be able to connect everybody that you work with all of those big organisations, and actually have an expectation that they will work with them because they are quality artists. And that's where we're at the moment. I've been in post for 3 months, so I'm sort of feeling out what we're doing, but that's where we are at the moment. That's the conversation that we're having. But there is more coming. You have been sent an invite today to another event, so I hope you come to it. So hopefully, by the end of December, it'll be much clearer for everybody where we're going and what we're doing. I hope that answers your question.
Alison, I'm very pleased to hear that there's definitely now a focus on excellence and the artists in terms of funding. And whilst on the face of it, that sounds absolutely wonderful. It is also clear that with Carnival Arts, it's very much seasonal, and therefore it's like the buses comes all at the same time. So one can be very, very busy during the sort of summer periods, and outside of that, it's very, very quiet. I'm just wondering whether or not there was any consideration being given regarding the way the funding is structured to ensure that if people are committed themselves to be full-time artists within the Carnival Arts, that there is an opportunity for them to continue to do that on a full-time basis.
What we're seeing actually, and I think we saw that kind of much more in the slides we've seen in the whole day, is that although clearly there's a carnival season, there seems to be now a whole raft of international opportunities to go and work in carnivals elsewhere. We're certainly seeing a rise in winter parades, so still using some of those skills, some of those techniques, working as an artist in a context which is more about sort of nighttime events. And I think so. I was particularly interested to see the example from Bremen, using projections. I think that looks amazing. And then there's also and it also seems to me that there's a whole piece of work needed, because I've heard it from you all before, which is about the kind of training, the mentoring, making sure that those skills are really developing. And that's the way which all artists, I think, work now, that there's a kind of portfolio arrangement whereby you're able to pick up pieces of work around the year. But it is something we are looking at in the broader outdoor arts sector.
Well, morning, everybody. My name is Sam Pearson. I run the Mzansi Carnival in South Africa. I'm a girl from Coventry who went to Cape Town 20 years ago and didn't come back. I want to thank you very much, because it's been really nice walking in this room today and feeling Carnival people. I feel like I'm at home, even though I've spoken to very few of you. It's really nice to feel that sense of global solidarity. Carnival people are the same everywhere. I want to cheer you up by telling you that in South Africa I was recently, 2 years ago, quite recently for South Africa, I was elected as the Western start to come into a space like this, where there are, 100 really passionate people who want to share, and they all get together, and we don't actually start talking about the nitty-gritties till 5 o'clock. That's when the real shit hits the fan. And I want to give you something back from our experience in Mzansi, which is in Cape Town, which is a carnival that was created to promote intercultural interaction in a difficult area. And if we can do it in Cape Town, where we are dealing with politics between people who speak 3 different languages, Xhosa, Afrikaans and English, you can do it here. I want to offer you this tool. It's called Open Space. I don't know if anybody else of you have heard of it, but for God's sake, people, get on the internet and find out about it. I will come, if you will fly me, I will come and do it for you for nothing. But learn how to make the most of the passion and the knowledge you have in a room. Do not make us sit here and listen to stuff we could read about on the internet the whole day. You all do amazing work, we can all see that, but what we want to do here is share and learn and make a plan to go forward. And I beg you to make use of that of open space or another facilitation tool like that, so that everybody in the room gets to speak to the people they want to speak to, and then everybody learns from that exchange. That is my gift to you today. I hope you can take advantage of it. Thank you.
Hopefully we are. Anyway, the short of it really, right, Alison, I don't know if I can call you Alison, I've never met you before anyway. Look, I've been blunt and to the point really, right. It's not about being happy, I'm quite knocked back by hearing the way that you deal with certain issues. And I think around actually sort of not acknowledging in terms of like carnival, in terms of its uniqueness amongst the other sort of street festivals and such forth. I'm going to try and be very brief anyway. The diversity issue really, right, it's an issue that all institutions actually sort of struggle with. And I don't think that the Arts Council is any different from any organisation. So I'd like to see some leeway, some sort of acceptance in terms of what people are feeding back to you, if that you're the conduit between government. There are communities, basically, right, that's disadvantaged. They're looking for some kind of institutional help that we provide here. It's more than just about arts, whether it be elite arts, fine arts, it's about communities as well. Because please do not forget that. And I don't want to say anything more, but I do think you need to listen and take back some of these things. Don't be so abrasive.
Well, I'm sorry if any of this came across as being abrasive. It wasn't meant to at all. I suppose what I would say, and I hoped which I said it clearly, but maybe not, was when I think about where Carnival fits in a Venn diagram across the arts, the part of it which is unique, which is special, which is particular, that's a big space. And I think that it's right the Arts Council recognises and acknowledge as what's special and what works, while also being able to use its kind of overview across some of the art forms and work to also support you with help and advice, which links through to other art forms too. So I hope we can do both. I hope we can both recognise what's special about Carnival and also bring in some of the knowledge from sectors elsewhere, and also vice versa.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you. It should be clear to you that diversity is not the same thing as equality. The diversity agenda does not address anti-racism, which is where a lot of the people for themselves in the Caribbean were making stuff here coming from. The state, a long time ago, decided on clever ways to take that away from the straight on charge and to turn it into something else. It's now diversity policy. It is not going to satisfy your anti-racist call. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, everybody who came. I think the last statement, we promised to almost say, listen, you've been wasting your time all day, until 5 o'clock to get around to talk about the nitty-gritty. Wasn't saying that. Wait a minute. Was not saying that. It was saying that you finished your homework there on a high, speaking directly to the people being authority, daring to say the difficult things, even daring to say things that you don't quite know how to articulate. You think there's something odd, funny going on here, but being tied up in words, daring to try to say it, that's a high. And Thank you to them all very, very much. Thank you all again. And I'm going to say goodbye. And thanks for finishing.